Welcome to Data for Future, the podcast where we explore the synergy between data and sustainability. With record-breaking global temperatures and unprecedented extreme weather events continuing throughout this year, we are witnessing firsthand the escalating impacts of a warming planet. The question comes naturally, how can we better prepare and adapt ourselves? That's where our guest today comes in, Chloé, as a climate data consultant. Chloé helps people and organizations to understand, monitor, and respond to climate risks using data science, statistical analysis, and physical modeling. Chloé's superpower is to transform complex climate information into actionable insights. If that piques your curiosity as well, let's dive together into Chloé's work and explore the opportunities and challenges of leveraging data to build resilience against climate change. Welcome, Chloé, to the show.
Thank you very much, Tammy.
So tell us, Chloé, what led you to specializing in climate data science?
To be honest, like at the beginning, it has been a bit random. I studied like mathematics. Originally, I wanted to do some astrophysics. Then, I found an internship and I studied like the monitoring the ocean. And I found fascinating how little we knew about the ocean. So at that point, like I was fascinated about the other planet of the system solar. And then I realized, oh, but we know in fact more about the Mars surface than we know about the deep ocean. And that sounded like a great challenge. And yeah, from math, so then I did math applied to physics and physical modeling. And from that, I moved to a PhD in modeling climate. And I've worked in my PhD in Indian monsoon. And after that, I continue into postdoc and moved little by little to extreme event, adaptation. And yeah, with the climate crisis ongoing, you realize that your work gets much more value if you can not only think about how beautiful is the Indian monsoon, but okay, how can we adapt to the change of the Indian monsoon for agriculture? How is this gonna impact population and all these kind of questions? So little by little, I moved from this kind of more theoretical understanding of climate to something much more impact. And yeah, now as a data consultant in different companies before.
Lovely. You do have a very strong academic background. So what excites you the most about working at the intersection of climate and data?
So I stayed nearly 10 years in the academia. So my PhD first and then different postdocs in Barcelona. I also worked in Météo France. And in all these places, yeah, we worked about things, we demonstrate the value of the data, but then it doesn't have like impact, you know? You get like these three big IPCC reports, you get like a lot of paper published. I mean, my area of expertise was seasonal forecasting. And basically in my last paper, I demonstrate like, oh, but we can actually predict quite a lot of things about heat waves 2-3 months in advance. But nobody is going to use this data set. This data is not understood. And yeah, your work feel a bit useless. So when I had the opportunity to move to the private sector and realize that there were like real people ready, I mean, wanting to pay to understand what's going to happen, to get more insight, to understand the data, that makes your work much more like, yeah, makes much more sense. And then, yeah, it's tricky because the data is complex and all these kind of questions. So that makes also the work exciting, no? But there are things you can do. And a lot of it is really translation from science into something which is correct but understandable. And that's where the main challenge is, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nowadays the situation still exists, but it's getting better and better as more and more climate startups realize they do need hard science to support any breakthrough for any of the first of a kind solutions. And it's great that you naturally dived your path into a more practical use case. And you mentioned you are also working as a freelance consultant. How is that experience comparing to, I believe, before you also work in the private sector for a company, for a startup? How is this transition for you?
Yeah, I really liked it. I mean, I think when I arrived at Cervez, so I had like, it's this kind of transition from academia to private. So at the beginning, private sector is a bit new. The career perspectives are very different, and all of that. And my manager asked me, where do you see you in a few years? And I thought, oh, maybe a consultant would be nice.
Okay.
And so it happened a bit organically. But yeah, for me, it's a bit my dream job, to be honest, because I really like freedom. So
Mm-hmm.
I really like to have the freedom of organizing my day, my weeks, my schedule in general, to choose a bit the client and the project I'm working on. And yeah, and to choose also, I mean, it depends a lot on the project. And in this past year as a consultant, we had different projects because we are working in a collective also. And some project, like the clients really know what they want, and so you do what they want. But some clients, they just say, "Oh, we want an answer to this question," and then you're really free about what is the path to do it, as long as it is, of course, scientifically sounding and makes sense. And yeah, I really enjoy this freedom. That's the best for me. And then, yeah, on the drawbacks a little bit, that freedoms comes a little bit with uncertainty. So, yeah, sometimes it's like, oh, but this client has disappeared, or no, they're not coming back, or are they going to pay this bill, or were they happy about that work, or all this kind of question. I even like after a few months, I start to enjoy like this kind of middle stress. No,
Mm-hmm.
it keeps you on your toes a little bit, so you don't get too comfy and doing always the same thing. No, you always have to challenge, improve, get new idea, and I enjoy that.
I love the mentality. And from our previous conversation, you also mentioned a lot of we, you work as a collective. You also have a network of consultants that you collaborate with for different projects and clients, right?
Yeah, we are four in right now. We might be more in the future, but we have all like this background in climate, remote sensing, and together we have like slightly different expertise. So it's great.
Mhm.
We can tackle many different projects in these areas, and yeah, we get support from each other. So that's yeah, we get this team feeling, even being consultants. So that's nice.
Yeah, I love that, to leverage your diverse technical backgrounds and to collectively solve big climate challenges. So let's talk more about the climate side, because your work you mentioned is a lot about measuring climate risks. Can you help to define what is climate risk and what are the types of risks we are facing globally?
Yeah, so this is a real like complicated question, no? Because like so climate, I mean, it's something we often don't realize, but our life is based on climate. I mean, the house we live in, the food we have, how we organize our day, our life, the holidays, everything is like related to climate, mainly the food and water, no, our survival things. But since we have like this kind of very comfortable life with everything has been artificialized, we forget about it. So we forget our dependency to climate. And this is a bit where the climate risk is that we forget like climate is variable by definition. And so we have a lot of risks that we know are there, but they don't happen often, like flooding, extreme rainfall, landslide. Depending where you live, you might experience that more or less. No, that's one thing. So those risks are there, they exist, and often we are adapted around them. Like, for example, you don't build your house just on the beach, no, because you know the sea might come in within a storm. So yeah, that's what we would call more acute risk. So
Okay.
these acute risks are going to change with climate change. But here is something quite complicated because there are extreme events, they are difficult to measure in the past, and their evolution in the future is also complicated because it depends to a lot of scale, interaction, all these kind of things. But
Mhm.
yeah, so to summarize, like we have the acute risks of flooding, wildfire, landslide, and extreme convective events, so extreme rainfall, extreme wind. And hurricane. But then there is another part which is more like the chronic risk, and that's more the part which is going to evolve strongly with climate change, in which in this part it's things that affect our life, but it's more difficult to see how it's going to impact in terms of money, like heat wave, drought, water stress, which will impact our industries, which will impact the energy production, which will impact food production, which will impact our access to water, and depending where you are and the vulnerability of where you are, like these risks are going to impact you very differently. So yeah, that are the main risks that we are exposed to, and those, especially the chronic one, are going to change a lot with climate change. The acute one are a bit more complicated. They are going to change with climate change, but there are also a lot of other factors that are very important, especially for flooding. Where you build your house is quite important. So,
Mhm.
so yeah.
So if I understand correctly, for the acute risks, we can measure it relatively easier and we can adapt to it because we know they are there, and but for the chronic ones it just happened increase little by little that we were not really aware and we're not necessarily prepared for it.
Yeah, so is it easy to measure like flooding? I mean, we can deep dive into that a bit more later. It depends a lot where you are. So, for example, in Europe, we get like big flood monitoring system, in the US too, but outside Europe, it's really hard question. Like, where is flooding? The records, the data sets, the database are sometimes registered in country in languages we don't understand, no, or even not registered, not publicly available. So it's really tricky depending where you are to get this information, and that's one of the aspect when you work with developing country, as I do. So yeah, in Europe we know, but even in Europe we can have, so with climate change, some extremes are different from the past.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to know exactly how it's going to evolve. For that, you need modeling and this kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another aspect, yeah, and the chronic risk. I mean, we see summer becoming warmer and warmer, but I mean, my feeling is that the society doesn't yet understand what is the impact on that of that.
Right,
In
to just turn on more AC or move to cooler places.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see. No, it's clear. And you naturally just kind of partially answered my second question is how can we effectively monitor and trace climate risks with data? And according to you, of course, depending on the region, there's different data availability, but for different scenarios, maybe you can give us more examples. What are the data sources and what are the data missing as well?
Yeah, so here is a real, like, it's a huge data ecosystem, I would say. So basically we have, like, there is two questions, no? I mean, three questions, I would say. The first one is, what is the climate somewhere? What are the flood, extreme event we've seen in that climate? And yeah, so that's the past climate. For that, like, there are a few good data sets. So one very good, which is a reanalysis which has been produced by the European Weather Center, ECMWF, it's ERA5. It's great, no? We know the past climate. I mean, there are a few uncertainties, but it's a good basis to start. Then if we go to real extreme, like if you want to know the wind burst, then
Mhm.
this data set, you arrive to the limit, because this data set is hourly, 6 hourly, and wind bursts are minutes. And we don't have this record. So for that, you need station data. And then station data are more sparse, and some station data doesn't record wind burst. And so then you get like a bit of missing data. Flooding is the same. So there are some floodings that are registered, but not necessarily exactly the extent of the flooding, the impact. It's a bit, yeah, you can find some information. It's not that good. So to fill that gap, you use models. No, models of inundation, hydrological model, and yeah, high resolution meteorological climate model for the storms, these kind of things. Those models can also then be used to respond to the second question, which is how is it going to evolve in the future? And so that's where like the big, what is called the CMIP6 climate intercomparison model phase 6, so which is the basis of the IPCC report. They've run those global climate model for the next 30 years. I mean, with very complicated calibration processes and tuning and things like that, but we don't care about that part. And then we see how the climate evolves. But those models also have limitation because they are coarse resolutions, so they don't represent very well like small feature, like for example, in the region I'm living, mountains. Yeah, the climate here and 100 kilometers from here is completely different, and that's completely missed by the model.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you could use those model, or you can use those model, both like big climate model or more like lower resolution hydrological or flooding model, to also try to estimate what is the risk of extreme events we've never seen, like 200-year, 1,000-year flooding, flooding events. And so that's for why you need modeling. So that's the data. It's available in a lot of different platforms for a lot of different regions with different format. And yeah, you have to navigate your way around it to find the information you want. What is missing? Like, yeah, a lot of things. Higher resolution, higher temporal resolution, more storm data set, more members to be able to assess extremes, better flooding data sets, a lot of things.
Yeah, I can understand the wish list can be very long. And you give us a really good overview about basically on the general level of data and modeling, we do have some stable data source and good models. But when we want to get into detailed specific events, you mentioned a lot of resolution here. Just quickly explain it. It can be, it's the granularity of the data, right? Is it on a second base, hourly base, or minute base? Or the distance when we talk about satellite image, is it covering like one data point every kilometer or one data point every 100 meter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the resolution. And the resolution will vary a lot from like the data sources, of course, and also for your need. I mean, for example, heat wave can be a relatively coarse resolution. It's not precise, but it gives you enough information. However, like if you want to assess flooding, if I tell you, yeah, it will be flooding somewhere in this 10-kilometer area, yeah, is my house in this 10-kilometer area? Yes or no? Like it's not the
Yes.
same. So for certain data set, you need very high resolution, which is not always available, at least publicly. So yeah.
And to go one step further, those data, what are the usually like sources of them?
So we have satellite data, a lot of satellite data, and like referring to the resolution, there is recently like a tree measurement data set at 1 meter covering the whole Earth that has been released, which is
Oh,
incredible.
wow.
Yes, the data size is just mind-blowing. Yeah, so this is mainly stored on the Earth Engine, and that's where it's really interesting to leverage like the Earth Engine like functionality to aggregate, to like take only the small piece you want because you clearly don't
Wow.
download like the full data set.
And it's free and publicly available?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's been released recently. I haven't worked with it yet, but
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
And yeah, and I've seen a few images in which like they see the trees in your garden, you know?
Oh,
It's
okay.
really impressive. So yeah, there is this kind of data set. But then when we talk about the climate data, what becomes like really important, especially assessing extreme, is the temporal resolution. Also the spatial one, both would be really important. But so for assessing climate change, since we don't have a second hairs on which we can put like climate change, so we have models. Models are a bit imperfect. So we have like the CEMIP6 does the assessment with 33 models. And so those 33 models, they will issue lots of variables like the precipitation, temperature, evapotranspiration, the sea surface temperature, the temperature under the sea, the soil temperature, all this kind of data are
Yeah.
in models
Yeah.
at different like temporal resolution. So model is another source of data. Those are accessible publicly, but it's quite an art to get them.
Yeah.
It's not super user friendly, I would say, at the moment. It's been improving. It's been improving a lot, but
Right, because that's one of the biggest issues working with climate data. There's so many sources that everywhere have a different format and a way of doing things. So once it's not standardized, it's a lot of problem to be solved.
yeah.
Personally, yeah,
Yeah, there've been like a lot of progress and convention and
yeah,
things, but what's really tricky is that so you get like a lot of different field working together. Like the hydrologist doesn't have
mm,
the same background as a climatologist, which doesn't have the same background as the remote sensing people. And then you realize that all of them uses slightly different vocabulary, different
right,
ways of storing things. And that's one of the big challenge working with big geospatial data
yeah,
is you open a data set and it's, oh, what's that? It's in
okay,
general the first reaction, like, what have
uh-huh.
they done here? Like, and then you realize this data set is coming from this, from that. So yeah, so they've done this and this is called that way, and
Yeah.
the units are different and all of this. Like,
Understand. I think also because you're facing those issues because you're really doing some deep level analysis. For me personally, once I did the analysis on my household energy consumption, I was pleasantly surprised to see I can easily download resolution 1 hour of energy consumption data for my own household. And I can use the Python library with 2, 3 lines of code getting the local temperature and with precipitation, wind, like all sorts of climate information just with a few clicks. For me, well, I was like, wow, everything is so organized and I have so much information that I don't even need to use everything. But I guess for your case, when you work on very specific problems, then you do need much more than that.
yeah, it depends. I mean, it has improved a lot in the past compared
Yeah.
when I started my PhD. I mean, we were sending hard drive, to people by mail with the data. So it has improved quite a
Right,
lot
right. Yeah.
in 10, 15 years.
Right.
Um,
Awesome. So once we lay well the background about where's the data coming from, and we mentioned a little about modeling, I want to go into some specific projects that you've done in the past to really talk about how data science is used in real life cases. Can you give us some examples on that?
Yeah, so I think an interesting project I'm working on right now is the GFS TAP project. So it's a project which is funded by the European Investment Bank, and the objective. So it's a very big project to try to shift finance toward green finance.
Mhm.
So it has a lot of different aspects into it. It's also about transition risk and how to shift the portfolios and like opportunities of the climate change. I'm working with my colleagues on that, but I'm more involved in really the physical risk part.
Mhm.
And so the challenge has been to try to create like those climate risk for developing country banks. So notably Armenia, um, Georgia, Kenya, and yeah, and one of the challenge is that yeah, those countries are outside areas in which we have a lot of data.
Mm.
So it's yeah, outside of EU and US, because there you can find much more data. And so yeah, this challenge has been to be able to find like sources that are good quality and cover like the whole globe to assess like those different climate risk and acute and chronic risk. That's one part of the challenge. And then when you find the data, the what matters to the bank is not, oh, is the temperature going to increase? They don't mind. Yeah, cool. Temperature is going to increase, whatever. So what you need is to be able to translate that into like damage curve,
Yeah.
risk, losses. And I mean, we still have work to do in that space, but I'm quite happy of what we've been able to build in this year, to really be able to take extreme event probabilities and translate that into risk on portfolio for banks. So this has been like the main work we've been doing in this project.
Can you give a concrete example? For example, in this city, there is a high likelihood of having flooding in the next 2 years, and that translates into however millions or billions of loss. That's
That's more or less how it works. Yeah, I mean we're not able to say in 2 years. So basically, how climate works will be like computing probabilities of occurrence during a year for
mm,
the next 10 to 20 years. I mean, we could do it yearly, but then yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
yeah,
So we just compute this probability, and then from this probability, it goes to damage curve. And those damage curves says like your portfolio is at risk of this percentage because of this risk.
and okay. So it's mostly related to the bank's physical assets. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
but that's also one of the challenge of working with developing country banks is also like we don't necessarily exactly know where are the asset, like some information sometimes missing. So we have to find ways to make something which still makes sense and is valuable without like the, oh, it's at this street, this number. And so yeah, finding a balance between like something reasonable and actionable, no, in which you can see the potential loss, and also yeah, and also something which can fit to this kind of uncertainty of the original input data.
For sure. And what's the percentage of time you would say between locating data source to building models to communicating the results?
Data cleaning and sources is time consuming. I mean, it's relative there because once you've done it for one data set, then it's done.
Mhm.
It's when you discover a new data set or you try to build a new data set, that's extremely time consuming. Right now, I'm working on water stress, for example, and it's been like a few days that I'm identifying the data sources. So now I found the data sources, and now I'm starting to go to mystical Google Cloud link to get the data and this kind of streaming. Maybe half,
Yeah,
probably.
I'm sure there's a lot of techniques about how to search, to research and locate different data sets, but we can maybe talk about that in another episode as well. So much details, so interesting. So what are your learnings from doing different climate risk assessment projects so far? And what are some impacts you've made that you would be proudly to share?
So my learning, yeah, this one will look a bit stupid, but the world is really complicated. Because all the time you open, I mean, you get like a new country and okay, and so you start reading about it and you realize that, oh, there is all this risk, and oh, and this rainfall system is quite different than this next country nearby, and this and that, and oh, it has this specificity and this mountain, And like in Mongolia, I realized that one of the main risks is the duds. Have you heard about duds? I never heard about duds, and I felt really stupid. Like it's a kind of massive snowfall which can happen in the early winter, and then Mongolia is completely frozen, and so like the ships and everything cannot access food anymore, and that leads to by like starvation and real humanitarian crisis. I didn't
Oh,
know that. And there are so little paper about it, and it's like, wow, okay, so yeah, the world is really complicated. And the other day I was looking at Armenia, and I was like, oh, but here there is a climate risk, and you look at the geography, and it's just like, yeah, and then you want to travel to what's going on there, like why is the risk so high?
uh-huh.
um so that's one of the learning. Another learning, I've been to Dakar to a conference with BCAO, so the Central Bank of Western Africa. And I was really positively surprised by how much now banks, especially in Africa, are really taking into account climate risk when they do their risk evaluation or in their portfolio. And yeah, that's now it's real. People understand it, and it's really not neglected anymore. In at least in the banks, which I think is probably one of the key actors to shift towards something more sustainable and more resilient.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like financial investment is the source of all the change we can power to make. Even though it's good in recent years, we've seen more and more change, but there's still a huge gap between what we need and what is done. But hopefully, with your line of work, we can inspire more actions and the faster. So
Yeah.
yeah. So what do you think are the impacts you've made so far with the analysis result you've delivered?
Yeah, I mean, I think like central bank and bank institution are a bit slow. So I mean, slow. Yeah, they're not moving at the startup pace. So yeah, can I really say that I had an impact on a portfolio tomorrow? I'm not really sure, but at least I know that thanks to my work, there are much more people that are informed of the reality
Mm,
of the situation and how much they should take into account climate risk. So I think it's good, it's positive, and it was following my work at Servest, in which I did the same. So I mean, as I see my role is to where this to increase this awareness in general.
mm,
um, I think there are like a lot of roles that are needed, like people to plan different implementation, to do like more sustainable agriculture, change the practices, reforestation. I mean, there is a lot of work. Right now, what I know how to do is more like, okay, this is the situation. So now you can talk to other people who know how to fix the situation. I'd like to
right.
learn more about this second part. That's that's an objective. But from climate to impact to adaptation, maybe in the future.
Yeah, but already knowing how to translate those complex numbers coming from sensors and satellites into some insights about this is what is going to likely to happen to impact decisions, I think you give yourself little credit for that, and that's already a huge impact.
Trying.
I want to talk about, more use cases that data is being used to measure and mitigate climate risk. We just mentioned how it really impacts in the investment and banking sector. What about other real life cases? You mentioned interesting cases in Mongolia or in Romania. Do you have some other prediction risk assessment you'd like to share?
I mean, it depends. Like other sector, I think a sectors that I've been really interested in is also this energy sector,
Mm,
because with the move of fossil fuel to renewable, one of the things is that basically we get much more dependent on climate on all this. And I think like, yeah, there is those energy trading market.
Mm.
Have already like a lot of information about meteorological timescale and things like, yeah, meteorological timescale a lot. But I think there is much more to do in all the energy sector in general for
Yeah.
for risk management, and especially there is something about like network risk, which is a bit different to asset to network. And also like future evolution, which how it will affect certain facility where you install them, and all of this kind of thing. I think it's also a very interesting use cases.
Definitely. And I think energy is the biggest lever we have in terms of transitioning to a more sustainable climate. And then there's just so many innovations. It's also a very active sector where it's more established in terms of data availability, especially when we're talking about European context. And me personally, I'm also very interested, there the supply and demand. How can we balance it when we introduce no new suppliers, individual households, commercial plants into the field? Definitely very interesting. But have you done any work in the space or you're just
Yeah.
following them?
Yeah, I've been working on a project which is paused at the moment, on like this seasonal forecasting of energy. So which would be forecasting between meteorological to climate, so 1, 2, 3 months in advance. And yeah, basically a lot of the issue we have is this question of storage between like different months, no? Because you get like
Mm,
more sun, more rain at other moments. So how do you balance these different sources? And
mm,
the more we know about how it's going to be the next season in terms of consumption and in terms of production, the
mm.
more accurately we could like use the different sources at the right moment. So yeah, I've been working into that and probably will continue at some point.
Yeah, very interesting and needed analysis indeed. Are there some emerging tools and technologies you find promising for the future line of work? There's a lot of ideal situations when working on climate data, but are there promising things that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's a bit everybody was going to say that, but the AI weather model, the AI climate model were coming in. I'm really curious about it. Until quite recently, I was following like the development, and it was really not working. Until, like 3, 4 years ago, I've seen a lot of conference like at the EGU where you see a guy saying, "Yeah, we set like this great AI model, and it's really not working." So this was like 2 years ago, and it seems that right now they made like a breakthrough, at least in the meteorological part. In the climate part, I've seen some announcement, but I haven't deep dive into it yet. So I'm really curious. What seems promising in our field is these hybrid things like merging modeling, physical modeling, and AI. And I think this is coming, and yeah, this is going to completely change. I mean, originally I'm a physical modeler, so working on HPC and all these kind of things. And right now I'm seeing like, yeah, this skill is dead. Like, move on.
Can be
Like,
replaced.
yeah, I haven't seen anybody wanted to deploy a complex model on the HPC for a while. So yeah,
Yeah. Now everything is AI in the cloud. But I guess how we can explain the models generated by AI, that also weighs a lot, right? Or is it only the output accuracy that matters?
yeah, there are a lot of questions. Like some people say that AI is going to understand things like physical modeling we're not able to represent and understand. Maybe. I'm still skeptical.
Yeah.
I want to see it, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's one interesting thing here is like the climate change. There is a lot of uncertainty about the climate change. Now I mentioned that before, and those uncertainties, there is a large part of it which is related to how deep the cloud, how high the cloud go in the equator. And this is related to very specific cloud microphysics, which we don't know anything about. And
Okay.
of course, it's things that are working at, I mean, we know a few things, but not that much. And this is at centimeter scale, so it's not reproduced. So maybe the AI can, with the right data input and things like that, understand more things there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm aware of one use case of that is which is the plane contrails, the white cloudy thing behind the plane. Apparently that accounts for up to 35% of the plane's greenhouse gas emission or warming impact. And with AI tool, we're able to identify where's the region we're less likely to have them, then guide the plane to fly into those zones. So maybe that's some cases that we already successfully done that, and hopefully we'll see more interesting cases coming up.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
Hopefully. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
a lot of
about road changing. Like that's
yeah,
great.
right. Yeah, a lot of promising things to look forward to. And in terms of data challenges, we mentioned the data availability, the source formatting, the quality of the data. Is there any other challenges in terms of applying data science into climate that you would like to mention as well? Anything that will be not that obviously identified?
So I would say like in the startup thing, and often you want to have platform that allows you to display the data. But one thing which is complicated is then you have to choose a little bit between like, oh, do you pre-store all that data, which is like huge data volume? Either you pre-compute everything, but in this case, you would like to keep track of the data you're doing and like the changes you implement and all this kind of thing, keep a versioning of the data.
Right.
And but with the data volume we are talking about, it's huge. So that's not probably very good. But if you want to do like on the fly calculation, so it's a client click and he gets the data maybe 1, 2, 3 minutes after, yeah,
Mhm.
the processes are often huge too. So the waiting time can be long, and often you get like bit random issue associated to the size of the data set or some, threads failing or this kind of things, or even like if you rely on external sources for the data, like the data sources being off simply.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's really tricky, I think, to create platforms and do things automatically is one of the challenge. One of my colleagues would say also one of the main challenges grid. Um, because you get like a lot of data with different grids. So we were talking about this 1 meter data set and this 25 kilometer temperature data set. How do you put that together? Because you
Match.
want the 1 meter, but you don't want to bring temperature to 1 meter because it's not meaningful. And
Yeah.
how do you make those different scale interact? It's really tricky. And yeah, one of the things I'm realizing working with clients is that everybody has his own scale. And so then you need to reshuffle the data, put them together for
Yeah.
every use cases. I mean, if you want to do something at, let's say, a region level, you can simplify the processes quite a lot, and then it's easy. But then if you have a second client who comes and say, no, I want it for this very precise location, and then just like, oh no, I have to redo it.
Yeah.
So I would say like the way you organize the data is a huge challenge. And any of the decision you take when you decide to create like your startup, and you have to be very, very careful because it's really easy you get a data set or a client use cases which just doesn't fit.
Yeah, those are the things you kind of just start to be aware of once you start really working on the project and answering real life questions. If not, you're like, oh, I have data of the weather, I have data of the wind, I can forecast this and that. But when it comes to real life application, there's so much details. And I just want to go back to what you mentioned in the first place about the amount of data quantity out there. You're absolutely right. There's a lot data engineer or machine learning engineer behind how to really use the data to output information, right? I don't know if there's a solution for that, but I think for startups, it's really a disadvantage. That's why when we talking about AI revolution, the power is really just in the hand of the few really technical giants. Not sure if we'll see any change or any solution for that, but so far that will be one of the concerns as well, you know.
Yeah, that's true. In the same time, there are also a lot of places in which you can find data, which is not
Mhm.
necessarily exactly the data you want, but which is more accessible. I think people make this effort. Yeah, and also maybe startup can be the instrument for this translation, no, from the very technical to the less technical. But there
Yeah,
are challenges there, and yeah, it's very technical.
yeah, for sure. Well, there are many different communities and platforms doing great things. So let's just hope more there will be more use cases. I think the last point I'd like to hit on would be you mentioned that you want to start a coaching project for academics to move into more practical sectors like private companies or startups. Tell us more about what's your inspiration and what the other problems you are trying to solve with that.
Yeah. So basically it came really randomly. So I changed from Météo France to my private company.
Mm,
And like in research, a lot of people see movement to private sector. Some people see it as a failure even. And then I was happy. And so some people came to me when I went to the EGU, so it's a big conference. Like the first one was a girl who came to me and said, "Oh, you've been to the private. You need to explain me everything." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, let's have a coffee." So I explained her and I said that generally I was happy. And
mm,
that, which was the first interesting information, I think, for academics is that there is a life outside academia. You can be happy outside. I
okay.
think maybe the main point of the coaching could be that with more detail because you need to convince them. They won't believe you. And then we discussed now what are the different mindset, what are the different wording, because some things are called a way in academia, a different way in the private sector. So how do you understand that it's the same thing but with different word? And so yeah, I took with her and this a few times, and it happens that now she has done the transition and now she's in a startup which looks really nice. So
Awesome. So you already have success cases.
yeah, yeah. And
It's
then
good
she
on
said,
top.
yeah, you should help more academics. One thing to know, I mean, for people who haven't been in academia, it's really tough. It's really competitive. They are not valued a lot for their work. They always feel they're bad. They don't know enough. So yeah, often people are not really happy. Then
Yeah.
very hard to create family, to organize your life around it, very precarious, all these kind of things. So then, yeah, the idea basically would be just to help people who wants to live, not to go drag them out if they are
Yeah.
happy. Tell them it's possible, you can be happy, and here is the things you need to know for you to be successful. So how to make your CV, which salary you can ask, what skill are you actually missing and need to
Mhm.
train on, all these kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. And you yourself is a very great case. And I love what you said. It's about really bring your knowledge into the real world to make a true impact.
I mean, I am pretty sure a lot of people would be more happy outside academia and doing real things and bringing the science into the societies and writing papers. And
I mean, we definitely need academics and the strong scientific discoveries, but I totally see how we can also guide those some talents from that pool into the private sector. So
yeah, and you see that the main limitation is that people don't believe in them anymore. Because since academia is so hard and so harsh on the people, the self-confidence have been destroyed after years. So it's just like, no, you're brilliant. You did a PhD. You've done this. You write this
yeah,
paper. You know this med. The world needs
that's
you.
Yeah, that's totally what I think about people in academics. A lot of respect. I think that's a very good place to wrap up our episode. And we'll go into the lightning round section of the podcast.
Yeah, perfect.
The first question for the lightning round is, what is one data tool or source that you find indispensable in your work?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the NASA GDP bias corrected dataset. It looks really geeky, but
That's a niche sector, but love it.
so the NASA has made a big effort to bring climate to bias correct. I won't enter the detail, but to make like the climate model, semi-physics climate model, usable for extremes and things like that. This data is not perfect, but if you want to know what's going to happen with most common variable in the future with climate change, for me, it's a reference. It's accessible through threads. It's also accessible through the Earth Engine.
I've never heard of those, but I will look into them. All right, second question, book recommendations. What are 1 to 3 books that have greatly impacted or influenced your life?
Yeah, recently it was a present, but the Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a Buddhist monk from Vietnam. His disciple had put together this book about a lot of reflection from him and also their own reflection on the Earth, the biodiversity, the climate crisis. And they take it from this like Buddhist perspective. And I really liked it because 15 years now in total working about like climate change. And sometimes you can have this kind of doomist feeling like, oh, everything is gonna be wrong, which is often not that supported with the data. I mean, it's more complex than that. But sometimes you can get this overwhelming feeling that everything is
Yeah,
going to be bad. And I have a son who is 7. So yeah, it's not nice. And what I really like with this book is that it's not saying it's not true. It's not saying nothing is gonna happen. It's just saying, yeah, but life is cycle. You can do what you can do. And that's it. Be in the present, do what is right now, and then like the future is going to be what it's going to be, but don't fear it,
yeah,
just act on the present, be in the present, do what you have to do. Yeah, which is, I mean, for me it has been really good to reflect on all of that. And this book in general is very deep in bringing meditation about our place as human being and the interconnection with nature and all these kind of things.
very good place to spark some reflections and inflections. And it's a good philosophy indeed. Next question is about, what do you see as the biggest opportunity in using data for climate impact?
Yeah, I would think like in general, if everybody could really understand their risk and get prepared for their risk, that would be massive impact. Like for example, here I'm living in a region in which we have drought, we have water stress, we have all of this. Nobody realizes it. Nobody is
Mm,
installing like efficiency water system because people don't realize that they're gonna need it. It's gonna be indispensable. So maybe like in the solution space, getting more people providing like doable solution also for people to adapt to what's coming
yeah.
is also important.
Yeah, absolutely. Like more awareness and education is always need, and it's a very strong force to move change forward. Next one, productivity hacks. So when you feel overwhelmed and or unfocused, or you lose your focus temporarily, what do you usually do?
So this one is a great hack, a bit like, I mean, it's not really a hack, but bit from this Buddhist mindset. It's actually connect to the feeling, which is like, in fact, when we're procrastinating, or it's often because there is an uncomfortable feeling about it. And I realized that, oh, I don't like to write. Don't I, why, what's going on? And
Uh-huh.
so connect to the feeling and just oh, I fear that it's not gonna be well written and people won't be happy, so I'm procrastinating on it because I have a fear. So this fear is like this thing, no, it's coming from the past, and so you can say, no, it's right. going to write. If I fear the result, I will pass it to a colleague to get a feedback, and that's gonna be fine. Just write it. And there is nothing to fear. There's no lion behind you, so you don't need to procrastinate. And that's been really helpful. And sometimes I realize, oh, it's my third coffee. Yeah, I think I'm a bit disconnected right now, and that works.
I love it. Instead of avoiding it or choose some techniques to confront it or like get over with it, you face it directly and connect with it. I'm gonna adapt that into my daily life.
Yeah, you will see,
Yeah,
like it's just like 10 minutes of and then you're able to work. Like
I love it. The next one is about what is one sustainability goal you've set for yourself this year?
it's a tricky one because I had like years when I was like deeply, deeply obsessed by everything. And drives me a bit crazy, to be honest. And so I decided to relax a bit of
Okay.
I'm not responsible of everything which is going wrong. So a bit take it easy is my goal with myself. It's a bit strange because I think we struggle to find the balance between being taking care of our environment and being completely obsessed with it. And I see it with a lot of people like freaking out and going to this absolute zero waste kind of thing. And when you have kids, this becomes a real nightmare. Like the zero waste and kid is very tricky. I mean, and working, maybe if you're not working, it could be all right. But so yeah, I for me, it's really focusing on the essential, like plain, so unnecessary plain. Meat is really using a lot of resources, which is most of the time unnecessary. And yeah, reduce processed food. And with that, you're already quite good. I mean, don't go every day to the mall. Don't buy anything you don't need.
Yeah.
So it's this thing, like just stay in the present, do whatever is rational, be pragmatic, and yeah, try to not burn the planet just to visit, I don't know, Thailand for a weekend. That seems be reasonable, no?
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely thoughts from a data person. Well, you kind of quantify the impact of every action and then prioritize. That's the how to use the Pareto rule in our lives, right? Only like very small, like about 20% of our actions account for 80% of our impact and how to do those well.
Yeah, so as you said, maybe the first one is check what matter and then act on
Yeah.
what matter.
Yeah.
So
On individual level, definitely traveling with airplanes, by far the biggest factor for our annual greenhouse gas emission.
and meat is also quite important.
Red meat on the beef side. Mhm.
Yeah, beef is man not good.
Yeah. All right. The last question is about failure embracement. So tell us, Chloe, how has a failure set you up for later success?
Yeah, basically, I think I failed. I failed as an academist, and that was great. That's the
I'm
best thing
glad.
that happened in my life.
Yeah.
I'm really happy I procrastinated to write this project and never wrote it. And yeah, no, I'm much better now.
I hope you can introduce this episode to your academic friends and see if you inspire some actions from there.
Yeah.
Like there are different options, and if you're really good and you love academics, go for it. But if you feel that's not right for you, and you showed as a perfect example, there's many ways out, and you can be happy and achieve a lot of impacts.
Yeah.
So with that being said, thank you very much, Chloe, for your sharing. And it's great to see how you transition successfully from, 10 years background in academics and bring that knowledge and skill into the private sector and introduce us a lot of interesting cases about climate risk assessment, the data behind it, and the innovations, things you like. I definitely learned a lot, and hopefully our listeners for this episode can also feel the inspiration.
Thank you very much. This has been lovely.